Thank you all very much for coming to our interview and our LitTalk with Claire Hanna, the MP for South Belfast. Claire was first elected to Belfast City Council in 2011, representing the Balmoral DAA. She remained in the role until becoming an MLA in June 2015, and in February 2019, Claire resigned the SDLP party whip in protest after the party agreed to form an electoral alliance with Fianna Fáil, stating that she would never become a Fianna Fáil MLA. After that, she returned to the party and at the 2019 general election ran for the party in South Belfast, beating out the incumbent Emma Pengelly of the DUP. And since the 5th of October 2024, Claire has been the leader of the SDLP here in Northern Ireland. So without further ado, hand over to Claire.
Thank you very much. Delighted to be with you to have a chat about my role as South Belfast MP, which is my day job and my side hustle as leader of the SDLP. As the introduction said, there have been elected in South Belfast since 2011, and before that I'm a native of Galway, although I've lived in Belfast since I was a small child. A graduate of Queen's, just because we're here and it's relevant, as a mature student, and a Master's in Law and a university degree, also as a mature student here before that. And I worked in overseas development, mostly with the Aid Agency Concern and Concrete for about 10 years before I was in politics full time. So 2011, Belfast City Council, 2015 the Assembly until 2019, which sounds like I was an MLA for about 4 years, but really with all the stops and starts it was less than a year in terms of time on the ball, and then in Westminster since then. My politics, I'm a social democrat in the Irish nationalist tradition, and motivated, I suppose, by social solidarity, international solidarity, anti-sectarianism, and the creation of a new Ireland. They would probably be the touchstones in my politics, and I suppose the drivers for the things that I do, as well as generally community service. And I suppose in these really genuinely wacky times that we're living in at the moment, I suppose a commitment to decency and democracy, and I suppose civility and respecting difference in politics. And if you've opened a social media app or listened to a podcast or the news in the last 24 hours, some of those issues are as relevant as ever. It's fair to say, and I said when I took on leadership of the SDLP about 6 months ago, I see this region as being a little bit stuck between, I suppose, its past and its future, and the SDLP in something of a similar place as well. I was clear, and perhaps it'll come up when we're chatting this evening. We are a party that's probably known for maybe giving fairly complicated answers to questions. We maintain that it's a fairly complicated place, and that there's a role for that. And I suppose my job over the next year, before I suppose the beginning of the next electoral cycle, is to work on the glamorous business of party political organisation, which is easier said than done, I must say. It's the bit where a lot of really good political ideas hit the rocks, but also, I suppose, just connect the SDLP's values back with people. As I say, it's not, this is respectfully a nerdy enough audience to talk about the values of social democracy, but I appreciate that that's not always what people are talking about in the bars and kitchen tables of South Belfast or anywhere else. But for me, it's about cohesion, creating cohesion in communities as much as you can. It's about, I suppose, looking after the vulnerable and also rewarding people's work and enterprise. It's about grabbing opportunities that is something that I don't think this region has done very well, and about, I suppose, planning for the future and protecting the planet. And I think those are the areas that we'll be focusing on. And I genuinely don't think anybody could credibly tell you that the political system is delivering particularly well on any of those at the moment. We are, of course, in opposition, and last night my colleague and leader of the opposition, Matthew O'Toole, set out in fairly expansive terms our philosophy really on that role and the culture of accountability that we're trying to create in politics here, not for reasons of party political gain playing, but just because it's people who live here and somebody who has lived here for decades, has raised the kids here, hopes to be here for a few decades more. I just think that we're not being particularly well served. That I suppose the Stormont executive, those ministers with the privilege of being in those roles, and we acknowledge we didn't get the mandate to be in there. They have power. They went out and they looked for power off the people at the last election, and they received it, and they're not using it. And we do have a culture, I suppose, of being really clear about what London needs to do and about what Dublin needs to do, but less so about the things that we should do ourselves. I'm not a Stormont MP or an MLA. I'm an MP, and that is, for me, it's a job. It's a substantial part of my job. It's not so much a principle. I mean, at a principle level, I believe in taking part in every political conversation using every democratic lever that's available to us to serve the people that we represent, and whether people like it or whether they don't, Westminster has a substantial amount of power over our lives, so it's appropriate to engage there. And it's appropriate to engage there as, I suppose, having respect for strand 3 of the Good Friday Agreement and the British-Irish relationship as well. And then I suppose the New Ireland part of the platform is the third leg of that, and a really big part of my political project for the next couple of decades, or certainly as long as I have any sort of a mandate to do so. And I said about sometimes having to carry complex messages, and I think one of them is that there is understandably and palpably a new interest in the concept of a new Ireland in the last few years because of all that we've just come through. At the same time that a lot of people, myself included, are finding the politics of nationalism and unionism quite stale. I think those two things can be true at the same time. And it can be true that it absolutely isn't sectarian to have a view on the constitutional question, as I do and as the SDLP does, while also thinking that talking just about constitutional change and talking about a border code every 5 minutes is pretty tribal and not conducive. But ultimately, in each of those things, it's going to be about relationships and about persuasion, and that's the project. I would much rather have a conversation with you rather than dammering off down any. It's been a long day, a long week, rather than me picking up whatever hobby horse is in my head today. I'd love to just have you're going to interview me. I did read the brief. I was going to say ask your questions, so I'll answer yours first.
Yeah, well, that's great. Thank you very much, first of all, for being here, engaging with students in this way. It's obviously such an important part of the life of the Litter, so thank you for that. I just want to begin really by talking about your early life that you just referenced. So you grew up in a political household, your mum was an elected SDLP representative. I wonder really, was politics a natural career path for you to take? Did you feel that from an early age?
So yes and no. It was definitely it was a political household. My mum was ultimately in elected politics. She was a nurse, and she didn't actually run until I was 17. So it was a politically active house. They were very involved in the SDLP. We actually, when we moved to Belfast in the 80s, it was because my dad took up a job in the SDLP. Before that, it was a culture of kind of volunteering and activism in the different ways. My kind of earliest political memories were probably that my dad, and we lived in Galway before my time, but he was always known as the guy who set up the cooperative and the water stream in our village, because the houses, the bungalows, like in my constituency, new homes are being built and developers are kind of leaving them without connections, and they left all these homes without connections to water, and my dad kind of bought one, realised this, and kind of organised it for the whole village. So that sort of self-help, if you see something you're doing, get in and do it was I suppose part of it. So it was probably in the mid-20s before I was independently involved. That's not to say that I wasn't out leafleting a lot and going to SDLP events, and I suppose just by almost yeah, it was just what we did as a family. But so no, I didn't have a burning desire towards elected politics. As I say, I was 30 before I ran for election, and I was very aware that my mum was in elected politics. It was very important to me that I wouldn't inherit her seat, and I didn't run while she was still in politics. And when the co-option came for her council seat and her MLA seat, I think by reasonable, I would have been in a fair place to go for it, you know, back to the party, but it was important to me to you know, as far as legitimately possible to be read on the scheme. So it was, I probably being involved in some sort of public service was always possibly part of the destiny, but no, I wasn't plotting, getting onto the ballot paper, you know, when I was very, very young. I really enjoyed my previous career and my life before.
Did your roots obviously go away initially? Did that have any kind of influence over maybe the new Ireland that you envisioned, or the unified Ireland that you envisioned?
Yeah, I think it probably did. I think it probably did, as I say, that kind of, I mean, parents were from the north, but that sort of, you know, Galway, West Ireland just has there's a confidence in your Irishness that you don't have to think about it like here. And then it's a bit more contested, and people always have to navigate their way through and kind of pick things and weave it around in a way that you don't. It's also a very it's a culturally diverse place. It's probably not even as diverse as Belfast in terms of, you know, ethnic mix and stuff, but it is an art big part of the world, and I suppose that kind of part meaning would have formed some of my worldview, and I suppose I'm also married to a Dubliner who met 20 years ago, and that I suppose so a lot of our life, you know, my in-laws and families and all of that would have been and still are in Dublin. So I suppose I probably do have a more all-island life than necessarily everybody in this region, and I think that's borne out in the data that actually, you know, we are all quite regional in Ireland. You know, Dubliners stay in Dublin and Cork people stay in Cork and all of that, and Northerners stay in the north. But yeah, so I think that has had a bearing, and I suppose had meant that I was more exposed to southern politics, which was obviously on a slightly more left-right axis. Not even, but I suppose just looked at things other than you know, nationalism and unionism, which was the politics that was available whenever I was growing up.
Yeah, and then obviously you moved into a political career. I just want to ask you, you know, the Northern Ireland Affairs Committee in recent weeks has heard evidence that women face barriers in Northern Ireland going into politics for reasons like intimidation. Obviously your party colleague, Claire Hanna, has had experience of deep fakes. What barriers did you personally face, if any?
Do you know what? I mean, I have had a pretty fortunate and fair to say privileged glide into it. You know, obviously did have to go, because at a time I was first involved in politics at a time of kind of fierce competition in the SDLP, which is a good thing in political parties in terms of, you know, getting on to the ticket. But I definitely haven't faced as many and some of the. It's as somebody who goes around and tries to persuade people to get involved in politics. All of the things that you've outlined are a real deterrent. I also ran for election before I had my first child, and that is a big difference as well. Just the time and space that a family creates in your life is not always conducive to the, you know, being everywhere all at once that you sort of need to be at the start of your political life. So for me, I didn't experience those barriers to the extent that so many other women are, but I'm no less committed to tearing them down. And I think you've highlighted so many of them, and including at the select committee looking at intimidation in all its forms, and that's I suppose a reality for probably people in politics everywhere, but particularly here, and everybody in politics, but particularly women, and I suppose the day and daily just vile that all elected reps experience on social media is a real problem. But yeah, so I suppose all of those kind of cultural, all of the same. I say this as a mum of 3 girls. You know, I just all of the same expectations that we have for girls and women versus that we have for women. Some of those things are still very real. I say that as somebody, you know, when you're, you know, kind of toys and clothes, and we're still offering girls and boys radically different futures actually in a lot of ways. So we've got a lot of that, and politics is definitely reflective of that. For all those kind of barriers to getting the time to do it, I suppose expectations of the personalities and the attributes of men and women, and as I say, the kind of moron who intimidates somebody is as likely to be misogynist as they are sexist and racist and all of those things. Yeah, so it's multi-faceted.
On that subject then, violence against women and girls, which is obviously a prominent issue recently, you've used your platform as an MP, you know, to highlight that issue.
Yeah.
How are you going to actually achieve concrete change for Northern Ireland specifically when, you know, statistics like us having the 3rd highest femicide rate in Europe, you know, are prevalent? How do you actually talk that into real life change?
Yeah, it is. It's an issue that has been kind of alive to for years. Actually, in my very old job 20 years ago, maybe more in Comic Relief, we were a big funder at the time of the Women's Aid Year, and so I had an association with them going back that length, and it was something I've been raising in Westminster for the last 5 or 6 years. There is, of course, now long awaited, but a few months ago, kind of a strategy in an executive strategy, and it's actually credit where due. It's not a bad piece of work at all, and I suppose it addresses the fact that it is everything. You know, it's you know, we need to do stuff in schools. We need to make substantial changes in the justice system. We need to, I suppose, fund the support services so that women, when they feel they need to, be able to leave their homes. So I suppose as an MP and as the leader of the SDLP, it's supporting all of those things and giving it a fair wind. And I suppose it's acknowledging that there's strategy and then there's culture, and culture is strategy for breakfast, as they say. So it is about, I suppose, tackling all of the things we just discussed about intimidation and about outdated behaviours, and I suppose never those things in the bud. Things like the experience that you spoke about that Cara had, you know, about getting, I suppose, you know, getting in ahead early on things like, not that early, but on social media regulation and artificial intelligence, and not letting, like a lot of other things like social media, we allowed to swamp us and go bad before we try to catch up with it. It's starting now to think how we regulate and prevent some of those harms.
Do you feel the Westminster government is listening to your, you know, pleas for that to change, you know, in Northern Ireland specifically? So, do you think the Conservatives are taking on board?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm under.
No,
it's fair to say. I mean, I'm under. I've never believed, and certainly not since I've been there, that Northern Ireland is the top of anyone's agenda in Westminster, and I'm always pretty honest about that. And I suppose, like a lot of things, they would see, you know, there's a devolved role, and they would try and be, and think particularly on violence against women and girls, you know, trying to just be as supportive as they can be to our own devolved administration here. And I know the Minister for Tackling Violence Against Women and Girls, Jess Phillips, was here 2 weeks ago, I think, and she had spoken to me in advance about it. Just trying to get, she was really keen to understand, you know, how is it that femicide rate is twice as high as it is in Britain, twice as high as it is in the Republic. Like, what is it about our society? And we have to ask ourselves that, what is it? And I think some of it is about we have a macho and violent society, even more so than other regions nearby. So yeah, I think that's something they probably are very motivated on the issue of I suppose deep fakes and some of those regulations. Yeah, Cara and I have engaged Peter Kyle, who formerly of the parish here, I suppose, as a former Shadow Secretary of State, is now Technology Minister, and we've met with him about those issues. And to be fair, he was already where we were at. You know, Cara had a number of specific ideas and initiatives, and they were all actually in progress one way or the other, and we're due to meet again in March to sort of check in on some of those, and largely those things will apply to us, you know, the kind of UK-wide thing. I do think and it's often a big hulking machine, we know that, but the European Parliament is going to be, and Commission in Europe is going to be key agent in getting to grips with some of these emerging and not even emerging, but these accelerating technologies, and that's where a lot of the regulation is going to be led from, I think, rather than, the UK is a relatively small player, and clearly the US in its current iteration is not going to be doing any of that.
So you referenced there that Northern Ireland, you don't believe Northern Ireland is top of the Westminster government's agenda. Obviously Sinn Féin, the main Nationalist Party here, don't take their seats at Westminster because they believe that Britain should be making decisions on behalf of the North. What do you see as your party's role in actually taking your seats? Is that actually effective?
Yeah, well,
as a nationalist?
I say in two things. One, it's from, and it's an old mantra in the community sector, as I said before, nothing about us without us. You don't have discussions going on where they're not at the table, they're on the menu. If they're going to be making decisions, you want to be in there. And I think history at some point will record the direction that Brexit took in 2017 to 2019, when there was nobody here, nobody to speak for this region other than the DUP. There was nobody to stand behind them, as colleagues within I have done for the last few years, to say, that's not true, that's not what people in Northern Ireland think, that's not good for this region. And when that voice was absent, that's when the Brexit process got completely out of control, and that's where we ended up with the suboptimal solutions that we're living with. And clearly there were MPs in all parties that were desperately seeking something to rally around, and there's nobody there to make that case. And as I say, I don't, if it's not right,
it's not the government could have pushed on with Brexit despite
we do have an parliamentary democracy, and MPs had the ability to, as they did at different times. I mean, there was 2 occasions where things like customs union and say the market access fell by a handful of votes, by 7 or 8 votes, and indeed, if the rest of Northern Ireland's views hadn't been represented in Westminster, the DUP simply would not have had an outsized effect. They wouldn't have been the margin for error if those other seats from Northern Ireland had been taken up. But the fact is, as I say, I don't like the constitutional arrangement any more than the next person who aspires to Irish unity, but I do accept the principle of consent, and we are part of the UK, and that's part of the decision-making framework. And as I say, in terms of the evolving competition in New Ireland, again, whether we like it or whether we don't, the UK government has a substantial role in that, and I think we'd be mad to not have a way to make that case. It's also really important to, I suppose, be there to interpret and explain and articulate Northern Ireland. I had 18 or 20 MPs over last Easter, just to try and show them that, one, it's not Mars, it's a relatively normal case for people trying to live their lives and do the things that everybody's trying to do, but just to, whenever funding allocation decisions are being made, and there's hundreds of MPs going, my town needs this, my town needs that money, to explain the complexities of this region and why we need the additional funding and we need the additional attention that we need.
Just want to draw you back. Colin Eastwood said that the oath was an empty formula, which he takes under protest. Obviously, in a United Ireland, decision-making efforts would be focused here. Is that something your party would consider, focusing your efforts here to work for people here rather than doing that on
I do work for people here. I work in Belfast. I used to live in Belfast. I'm in London, as I say, probably less than 48 hours a week, and that's what we do. And I serve the people of South Belfast and also the people of Boyle. As I say, it just so happens that the government currently has overall sovereign control in Dublin. So yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, I would like to, by the end of my political life, be a servant PD in Dublin, and I think that's likely, and that South Belfast will have one. Whether or not it will choose me to take up that role is another matter. So it's not an ideal one.
Okay, so just obviously you've had several changes of leadership over the past while.
Well, 2. Colin's there for 9 years.
He failed to change your party's fortunes. I would just want to ask you, really, how will you change those and kind of what the difference will be?
Sure.
He obviously was hailed for excelling in election debates, and he retained your party's 2 Westminster seats. Mm-hmm. Or was seen sort of take it to SLP, or
There's no doubt. I mean, whether or not we can't see too far in the future, but in terms of that peak of getting 24%, yeah, I'm not going to get you there. I'm being really honest about that. I'm not saying, make SDLP great again and it's all going to be brilliant in 2027. I'm completely aware of the realities of politics that we are currently in, the period we're in, and the SDLP's electoral fortunes. Believe me, I've probably spent more time than almost anybody thinking about this. Yes, Colin is an unbelievably good political communicator and thinker. He also, led the SDLP through 11 elections in 9 years or whatever it was, and a lot of firefighting, and I suppose quite properly, but to the death of the party. I think a lot of the time, and I sat through dozens of meetings with the Irish government, the UK government, when we were sort of giving an analysis about what needs to happen for the interests of the region, and you need to do this constitution, you need to do this in Europe, and you need to do this to get the DUP in the right place, and the Shinners will need this, and I suppose probably trying to fix problems rather than necessarily focusing on looking after the farm, and that's something I hold my hands up to. We probably focus a little bit too much on politics and a little bit less, and I suppose trying to think and explain rather than connecting with people on the ground, and that is, as I say, that's the job now to I suppose try and articulate the things that aren't really working for people here and how we want to change them. I'm under no illusions about how difficult that will be. I'm not pretending that the SDLP is going to have 24 MLAs in the next assembly. I'm a realist I'm an idealist, but I'm also a realist. So I know it's as I say, pretty painstaking unglamorous work. It's not the exciting end of political life. It's not kind of setting hearts racing and in debate. It's going around and being beside people and meeting volunteers and engaging them and trying to get a few quid into the bank and all of that. But that's the job that I signed up to, and that's what I'm going to do in the next year.
Yeah, and obviously politics is something being in it, is something that kind of requires forward planning. Your vote share went down in your 2 Westminster seats at the last election.
I think we were playing with the constituency boundaries. Mine didn't. I think our went down by not.
It went down.
But because the constituency changed quite substantially, but if you look ward by ward, it was more or less static, which is remarkable, really. And the Green Party being in the race.
Your third.
Don't mind me putting that out. Sorry,
Your third target state of South Down.
Yeah.
No, but then
you're absolutely right.
And what would your plans be going forward? How do you kind of plan to pull that?
Yeah, as I say, yeah, absolutely. I suppose 2 things. As I say, that ground level up. I suppose ultimately at its most basic, bringing in more people and activating them, getting them involved on, as I say, the boring business of democracy and knocking doors and putting material through doors, and I suppose being engaged and present in communities. And I suppose trying to, and I mentioned that culture of accountability, trying to create lines between things that your politicians do and the way that you cast your vote, because that doesn't happen, and I think everybody acknowledges that doesn't happen. Yesterday in the Assembly, a minister, John McDowell, a very capable guy, was asked about something in his manifesto. He said, "I'm not accountable, this shouldn't be a manifesto." There isn't really a sense that when you go out and vote, that has a bearing on the public services that are, those lines don't seem to exist here. The same things as, the things that the government does with the economy, for example, and the outcomes they get. Usually that has an influence on the amount of money they have to spend on the things they want to do in their political programme. But that doesn't happen here either, because the check kind of comes from London regardless. And so I suppose it's pointing out those things to people and trying to, I suppose, empower people a little bit and say, you're entitled to a better standard of living, and we believe there's a way to get you there. And as I say, that's not going to be a very simple task. Where you're in a political, one of my friends said, you're a sort of an analog party in a digital world, and you really need to kind of sharpen up some of those messages. But I think we can do more spaces politically. I really do. I think the initial, I suppose, that period of the last collapse up until this time last year, those couple of elections those were nothing to do. The people's votes were nothing to do with people weren't in any way voting or supposed empowered to vote about things that affect their lives, affect their kids' lives, affect their parents' lives, affect their university, affect the health services that they get. We were voting. I'm not saying the votes were we were voting on tribal issues. We were voting about who's going to be top dog for understandable reasons. But we're saying now we're in the assembly, you're entitled to not have to wait for 75 months to be seen by a consultant and all those things. So that's the project, the politics, and as I say, a political machine that will help us disseminate that message. As I say, I'm really clear-eyed about the challenges.
Do you think people now, obviously we're at a time when Sinn Féin are experiencing a bit of an electoral surge, do you think people look to them as the strong voice for nationalism? Yeah, more likely to achieve the
yeah, and as I would say, I think they absolutely do. And I think Sinn Féin, if you're I wasn't a student of politics, and some of you may be, they do that really well, and they project a sense of momentum and a plan. I would argue that it isn't, they had kind of, not that you had one job, you had two jobs, and they were they were creating, I suppose, trajectory towards a new Ireland. I don't know that they've done that. Nationalism is very static. That's just a reality, I'm not being a newsletter talking point, but it is. We haven't really grown the base of nationalism. Sinn Féin have grown probably larger than the SNP's expense. We're not really converting new people. We're not making interest in New Ireland be a demographic of interest. We're just hoarding off the nationalist votes, so I don't think we're achieving that. And then I suppose the other part of you have one wrong. The second part was to use the promise of the Good Friday Group and devolution to improve people's lives. And I haven't done that either. So yes, people, no doubt, and they're really, really good at political organisations, and they're really, really good at communications, and I won't take that away from them. Well, I don't think they're actually delivering on either of those two things. So
I can't quite. Okay, well, we're missing out on some really interesting.
Is it? Should I speak louder?
Yeah, I just feel we're missing out on a good conversation. That's all.
This is the first time in my life I've ever been told that I'm too quiet, so I'm going to take it.
On a good conversation, you're making some really interesting points.
Yeah.
And I think we should have a wider audience.
Oh yeah, we're all about. Yeah, good. Yes, and good question. But yeah, so look, and I think that's, and people talk, and the SDLP talks a lot about Hume and Mallon and all of that, and I've kind of almost put a swear jar in, I don't talk about Hume and Mallon anymore, except if it's to connect their values. But I think what people got from John Hume and Seamus Mallon and that Free Rogers and that generation was the sense that they had a plan and they were bringing you somewhere and that you could trust them to know what to do in difficult situations. And that's I suppose the thing that we're working to communicate. I think Matthew O'Toole does that well in the Assembly. I'm trying to do the same with colleagues at Westminster. But yeah, no, I've no doubt Sinn Féin are a much bigger party than us, and I also don't think that the SDLP just exists to orbit around Sinn Féin. I think we offer something very different. I think Sinn Féin's electorate are, like a lot of my electorate, very, very interested in New Ireland. I also think people that, I think, there are a lot of people who are interested in New Ireland, a lot of people who are interested in, I suppose, reform and anti-sectarianism, a lot of them are voting for alliance. The SDLP and that big Venn diagram of politics is the only party that's doing both of those things. And I think there is a political space there. We want to go out and try and persuade people to come and visit us on it.
Do you think, I suppose, your messaging around, your vision of the New Ireland has been clear enough and separate enough, to what Sinn Féin's view of United Ireland might be, do you think?
So, as I say, we have, for honourable reasons, not, because as I say, I don't think just all the time actually advances the United Ireland. I think trying to work on reconciliation and making this place less of a basket case and all that is probably more constructive. But yeah, I think for honourable reasons, we try not to cross the wires too much of the Brexit stuff and New Ireland. We try not to make those two constitutional debates coterminous, because we knew that wouldn't help get a good outcome in Brexit. But we are focused on it a lot more clearly, and we do think we have a clear niche. We clearly have a convening power in the Republic. It's fair to say that while there's rhetorical support in all the political parties for unity, there isn't a tremendous degree of motivation from particularly some of the bigger parties. For understandable reasons, they're trying to serve their electorates as well, but we, I suppose, do have good reach in all of the political parties in the South, and we're trying to grow that in the media and civic society in the South as well. So yeah, I think we very much have a niche. I think that reconciliation-based approach. We also have a proven track record in having difficult conversations and persuading people to I suppose do things that they're instinctively not in favour of. If you look at the likes of South Belfast, if you look at the elected left, clearly there are thousands of people who identify as unionists and vote for unionists in other elections to vote for me. So we've demonstrated that we can speak to and bring together political coalitions that other parties haven't demonstrated the same reach in. And as I say, ultimately, if you want New Ireland, it's about those of us who want it persuading those who currently don't. It's not just about Parliament all the nationalist votes. That's not going to get us there. Or if it gets us there, it gets us there on a very narrow margin, and that is not the start for the fresh, modern, pluralist new nation that we have in mind.
Yeah, and final question really from me, but how do you plan to actually persuade those unionists, at a time when the NHS, that there's prices here, newspapers are citing that people are afraid to turn up to emergency departments over fear of waiting times, the latest Irish Times opinion poll stated that there's a clear majority still in favour here of remaining within the union. How are you going to actually pitch to those people that really what you want to do is enact seismic change?
Yeah, so I suppose
in a period of what is already a period of
well, I'd say three things. One, yes, that same data it absolutely shows, and as I say, that's why we're portable every 5 minutes. We don't believe that work is done yet. It does show direction of travel. It shows if you look at the acceleration in the last sort of 7-8 years, which would be the last 2 years, in those Irish Times numbers, and they're doing a lot of data work and a lot of kind of intellectual work on it. But if you I can't remember exactly, but if you have that trajectory, you will be at in margin of error territory by about in 2031. So that's not a million miles from now. I'm not saying you win a border poll then, but there is a direction. But it's precisely because as you rightly said, the status quo is not working for us. It is not working for us. The National Health Service, you have the right to join a waiting list and very little else. I'm not saying the Republic's health service
is people that more change is the answer.
But I think part of the problem, and one of them, it's not about what political unionism did or didn't do. They've created a very turbulent experience and they've created a very unstable time. So they've probably made it easier to say, well, if change is happening, let's protect ourselves from some of those negative change. But it's precisely because the status quo isn't delivering. The NHS is failing. The Irish Health Service isn't perfect. It isn't a utopia. I do have pretty up close and personal experience with it through my mother and father-in-law, and I'm telling you, I'm glad that they're there and not here. In terms of the services they have access, I really, really am. It does have better outputs, and when you look at kind of the amount that's spent, the bottom line is the outcomes are better in the Republic system, imperfect though it is. But we can see an alternative, and it is like the Sláinte care model, which is the best elements of great point of use in the National Health Service, but delivered in a more effective way. Secondly, the world that we're in, I'm really genuinely proud of Ireland's footprint on the global stage. In a way, I'm not so much with the UK. I think it is a positive influence, and I absolutely want to be part of that. And I suppose just the way that it's managed change and integration and diversity is really inspiring. The way that it prioritises and respects and enables culture and the arts. I think those are things that my voters of all backgrounds would want in their lives, and I think that people are actually quite interested in that conversation, and I think the more that we step into it, the more people will be up for it. The mantra that unionism is engaging is not something that I found. I have conversations all the time with people who aren't saying, where do I sign up, but who are definitely interested, and I suppose what the SDLP will be saying to them is, if that's the direction of travel, do you want to be a passenger? Do you want to just watch it unfold, or do you want to come with us and be a part of actually shaping it? If there is I suppose, I don't think there is an inevitability of constitutional change, but there is a direction of travel, and part of our pitch, and I appreciate we have to refine that and we have to amplify that, but it is come with us and be part of shaping that. Don't just sit and go, gosh, I wonder what's going to happen constitutionally in the next 10 or 20 years. Get involved, put some shape on it, make it a proper new Ireland, make it not just, I suppose, a grafting on of this region to an existing state. Successful though that state is, I don't think anybody can look at the state of the United Kingdom at this moment in time, at the role the United Kingdom has in the world, and think that that's the future.
And on that note, we'll go to questions from the floor. Is that okay with you? Just hands up. Yeah, we'll go to Tom first.
I was at the event last night in Ulster, and
You really are a nerd. Like that's my job.
But Matthew talked a bit about kind of the dynamic within the executive, kind of the opposition within the government kind of thing. It happens in smaller parties sometimes, or often, and kind of continue today, even despite the struggles of opposition. So say 2027 comes, and basically has a better election than we did last time, we gained a few seats. Do you think that as a party you could better serve constituents and meet people north in opposition, or back to some of the smaller parties within the executive, and maybe having that kind of dual role of sort of minister / opposition? Are we better off kind of with a stronger, more enhanced official opposition outside of the structure?
Yeah. So there's plenty of fences to jump before that election, but thank you for supposing and putting out a hypothetical that we'll have all these extra seats and entitlements. I agree. Everybody, most people get involved. I get involved in politics because I want to change things whatever you want to. And again, I think it's in the SDLP's DNA that you talk about it, but you also know that you've got to get your hands on levers and you've got to get good people in there to make change. So of course we wish to be in the executive, but we're using this time and we'll make that call based on facts on the ground in 2027. But we're using this to try and change the assembly, because we have had experience of being meat in the room in the executive and being a small party and being, kicked around basically in the business, having been transacted early before the ministers actually get round the executive table. So we're trying to shine a light on some of those flaws. We're trying to create some of the reforms that, for example, don't allow the thing to be held down for years and don't allow, I suppose, every election to just be a contest by which gang is bigger. And we think all of those things, whoever wins the next election and whatever seats come out, we think all of those things will improve the decision making. So at the moment we are, as I say, we are very, very clear. And somebody asked a question about, do you not just in opposition to the next election? And Matthew was like, I know, I literally just said that. We're not implying that, basically, as we said, you can't fire us, we quit. We went into the opposition, but we did that because we didn't win a mandate, and we believe in respecting what the people said. And there have been times, there were other executives for parties didn't get enough seats to be in the executive, but they did be side deals and they got into the executive. And that was on the table. And I think it's very clear when the executive was being restored, I think all the parties would have liked it to be a five-party, but we are taking the role we currently have seriously, and we're trying to change the culture of Liberty. We're trying to just remind the executive and all of the people that they have a lot of power, and they told you that they were going to use it in your interests, and we'll see where we are in 2027.
We'll go to Darren.
Just after the Charles Road, just not doing it, then SDLP and for Miriam on left the return strong on the domination of Matthew through the leader of the opposition to the SDLP to manage Leach in a football match. He's thrown there by a helicopter for a serious benefactor. If Keaton and Cole or Paul Bradshaw decided they were going to manage Kildare for right, I don't think it wants to be experienced, but who knows, they might get the call. Would you accept part-time MLA for South Belfast?
Well, here's the thing. We go from big ideas to your own tittle-tattle, but some people have different interests in politics. Very, very clearly, Justin, who has a decades of experience and ability in the GAA, was, like a lot of people, went out, ran for election in 2022, served people as a legislator, and other parties prevented him from doing that. He served his community in different ways, and one of them his participation in the GAA, a really positive force. The fact is, he absolutely, and I wasn't the leader then, but he missed a key sitting. Whips exist for a reason, and the sanction was very much appropriate. You know what's probably actually changed the outcome, and whether Paula or Kate or whoever, I think all of us thought when the Assembly came back that, my God, it would be full tilt, and we'd be sitting late on Monday and Tuesday night, and the committees would be flat out doing all the things that everybody said they were going to do. That hasn't happened. The executive hasn't delivered on 50% of its own legislative programme for last year. So in fact, Justin has managed to participate. GAA is seasonal, as you know. So there were months of the year where he invested more time. And I suppose, given the embarrassingly light legislative agenda, he has managed to, and he has been there, and at the times he needed to be there. That didn't seem likely with the legislative agenda that we were expecting. So I'm confident in saying that the people of Uri and Armagh have a full-time MP, and I'm also confident that Paul and Kate would be very good team managers like that as their constituency colleagues.
Go to Ryan.
Just kind of following on from Tom's question. We had a few weeks ago Mike Nesbitt for a talk, and Claire questioned him about the fact that he acts, even though he's in the executive, he criticised the executive quite a bit and asked him whether he thought it would be better, if those criticisms would be better coming from the opposition. So he kind of said yes, but also that defended him still being a minister. I guess my question is, would you welcome if at some point in the future, even though the EU are entitled to go to say if they decided to kick Matthew out of his position as leader of the opposition and try and redo what was happened about just less than a decade ago when the EU and SDLP joined up to present like a cross-community opposition?
And because that's a system that we have, the system doesn't allow, an election 27 is like bend no charlatans and the SDLP will take over all portfolios, and it is a power sharing system. And actually, that was personally, I think, probably the most professional and rewarding time in my career. That brief opposition period, because I thought it did change the culture. It did shine a light on some really rocky goings on. Now, like I say, it's worth noting that even though oppositions are supposed to bring governments down, and we spent the last few years trying to get one formed, but we did bring that down after whatever 9 or 10 months, and both of those parties got the biggest vote they've ever had after RHI and SIF and all of those alphabet soup of scandals. Look, what the UUP and what Mike decides to do for that party is for Mike. I suppose I understand his frustrations. I consider Mike a friend, I'm an admirer, and he's got a big job. I do wish to see more reforms in Hull. I appreciate he's got things that he wants to do, and I suppose perhaps he feels that he's not getting the support around the executive, but I would think for his own for the people he leads, working in and using the health service, we need to see some of those reforms, and I would hope to see, in general across the executive, and genuinely very disappointed commitment to reform, with less than half of 1% of budget, that the much bigger budget than anybody expected that they have for this financial year and next is going towards transformation. It's absolutely the case. There's never going to be enough money for health, and health services everywhere are struggling with those challenges, but I don't think we are even starting to eat the element of reform that we need to do, and I guess that's probably Mike's focus for the time being, and God, I wish him well, because again, we all need it to work, but we need to work really fast.
We'll go over this side over here. So you grew up in a politically active household. How do you think that the SDLP, or really any Northern Irish party, can become more engaged with younger voters? I saw that there were a decline in voter registration in the 2022 election. So what are ways that you can?
Yeah, it is absolutely, it's a big challenge. I suppose I would estimate far less than 1% of the population is involved in the nitty-gritty of democracy, and I think that's really sad. I think party political membership has declined across the world. I think that's understandable in some, but it is not a good thing. So I suppose it's about making it relevant. One of the ways you do that, and say to our elected reps, you go out and the way you counter Trump-type politics is about allowing people to believe in politics and allow them to see it working in their area and to see their representative, doing and saying things that are meaningful and important to them. So that's one of the ways. Another, I suppose, is I talked about that kind of fairly, sounds a bit airy-fairy stuff around respecting difference and sort of the quality of debate and democracy, and that is about compromise, because I think it's very easy for all of us, as I worked in organisations that do campaigning for a decade, it's very easy to kind of, I support this campaign and I support that campaign, I don't like that bit of compromise, and the SDLP has been a broad church for years, and for example, if you look at, say, some 40 issues around abortion, we had a range of different views that reflected the range of different views that were in the population, and people were like, oh, you're disgusting, and your friends are somebody who's anti-choice, or your friends are somebody who's pro-choice, and that can't be. And we defended the view that people move at different paces and compromise, and I suppose reconciling views rather than pitting them against each other is the way to do things. So I suppose it's living out that spirit, that practice of compromise and reconciling views, and I suppose particularly to younger people, it's trying to make it feel relevant to their lives, and I know it's Stormont isn't that. I say all the time that joining the political party is a bit like picking a girlfriend or boyfriend. There's not a perfect one out there, but you find the best available and you spend the rest of your life trying to fix it. And I tell people that's very similar to party political activism as well. You won't agree with me or with anybody else on 100% of issues, but if you agree with the values and the direction of travel, you get stuck in. And for better and for worse, SDLP is a party that absolutely allows getting stuck in. It is a party that is at times overly democratic, and that there is a role for it. But I know that we're in the foothills of that in terms of being where young people are, and I suppose seeming relevant to their lives. I'm also aware that the SDLP does have such a proud heritage, and we have a lot of big beasts who stalk the earth, and so if you googled the SDLP last week, you would have had Mark Durgan's book launch, brilliant book. You would have had Alvin McGuinness, who hasn't been in NLA for 10 years. So people probably go, geez, not old people in that party, and I suppose it's putting the face of the younger and fresher representatives in front of people, including online and on social media channels that I probably haven't even heard of. But yeah, so all of those things, it's very much part of the project. But
just wondering, as you have some sort of official connection with the Labour Party, I don't know what the full setup is there. What is your evaluation of the Labour government, and if you had to say maybe one or two things they've done well and some of their failures?
Sure. So we are sister party, we're both members of the Party of European Socialists and Socialist International. I'm very proud of that part of the SDLP's heritage, that from the foundation, I don't know how many times I've put the Hume swear box in, but when Hume and others founded the SDLP, they located it in the Social Democratic European mainstream, as did the Labour Party. And so yeah, we're sister parties, and we share a lot of common values. I have two sisters, so I can tell you that in politics and in life we don't agree on absolutely everything, and we live very different lives, but we do share common, and there's a lot of Labour MPs that and if I lived in Britain, I'd be a member of the Labour Party. So like a lot of people, I haven't been overly inspired by the current government. I appreciate the shit show, for want of a better word, that they inherited. In terms of good things that they've done, they did, we can talk about the ways that they did it, but I suppose fiscal loosening of about 40 billion that they have released in October budget into public services. It remains to be seen how much people will feel that, but if you look at the extra 1.5 billion that Northern Ireland got, so there's that, you know what I mean? Like, it's up to us to spend it properly, but that is a substantial change, or it should be substantial changes in our lives. So they've done that well. They have committed to repealing the Legacy Act. This is one of the issues that, now again, it's a work in progress in how it looks, but I think that was an important thing, and the first steps have been taken on that. And I suppose they have honoured the and not mucked about with the post-Brexit trading arrangements. I know as an MP, I really felt every week up until last July that I was, receiving grenades from the UK government. Every week there was something dreadful being launched from the UK government to go and respond to. I haven't felt that to the same extent as I'm not loving it, but I'm also not feeling that we're fighting fires and that people aren't just kicking the wall of this fragile place every week. So that's a material difference that we can't underestimate. I think they're communicating really poorly. I think they're not entirely in the wrong place, but they are in the wrong place on Gaza. I think they have totally failed to understand the concerns of a lot of people. I think they have, I suppose, been so much post-traumatic stress about their Corbyn period and the perceptions around anti-Semitism and properly addressing those issues that I think they fail to understand how profoundly disturbed people were by what was happening in Gaza. And I think they failed from the front bench to articulate that. I know I would stand up in statements before and after the election on matters pertaining to Gaza, and 99 Labour MPs would stand up and say very similar things to me, but I don't think that was reflected in the front bench. So that is a little grab bag of things they've done well, things they've done poorly. They've got 5 years, and I hope the trajectory is. But I don't think that it's politics and about choices. We either have this lot or we have the last lot, and I definitely prefer this lot. And as I say, as somebody who was on the front lines of receiving stuff that they were sending in Northern Ireland, and from beating paramilitaries this to breaking international law that to offering a blanket amnesty in troubles this, those weren't good things, and they've slowed for the time being. James,
I'll just go from one Labour Party to another. You have canvassed for the Labour Party in the Republic, as well as Fine Gael. There has been somewhat of a discussion that, albeit primarily focused on Twitter, which is quite common here, seemingly. Is there any movement for the SDLP to enter any sort of an alliance, or even, as some has suggested, a merger with parties like the Labour Party, or people have also suggested the Social Democrats in the Republic?
So I think I make no secret of the fact that I'm proudly a member of the Labour family, and I have canvassed for the Labour Party. Not a good friend, a married one, so it's a lot of good friends, and a lot of good friends in other parties too. I was also genuinely very excited by the kind of fresh social democratic vista that opened up in the general election in the south, and the success of both Labour and the Soc Dems, and the fact that 22 seats are now represented by kind of mainstream centre left, and I think that's really exciting. And I've met extensively with both those parties, and will continue to do so. In your introduction, you mentioned that I hadn't supported an exclusive relationship between the SDLP and Fianna Fáil, and I've never argued for an exclusive relationship between the SDLP and Labour either. I believe that the SDLP is very often the common ground in southern politics. We've prevented the North being too much in political football, and basically I see part of the role as finding and encouraging and supporting all of the TDs and senators, and hopefully when resource allows, councillors in all of Democratic Ireland who are interested in the North, and I suppose working with them and networking them, because creating a new Ireland is not going to be a job for any one party or any two parties. It's going to need to be all the parties. So while I suppose my values most closely aligned with Labour and Social Democrats as well, I just don't know them so much, and I don't know their policies as intimately. My job is to, as I say, build really good links, and we've been doing that. We we've had in the 6 months since it took over, we've had 5 or 6 events in the Republic, we launched a couple of papers, we had a really good event 3 or 4 weeks ago that had I think 5 or 6 dozen DVDs up from all different parties, and I think that's a powerful thing to be able to do. So that's my project for the time being. But I make no bones about my excitement and joy at Labour's success, and also at Labour's ability. You know, people were saying they were dead less than a year ago, really, and to go from 4 seats and a potential wipeout to is a tale I'm enjoyed watching and something I'm gonna try and learn from.
Okay, probably last couple then we'll move up row first of all.
Thank you. Very articulated yourself very well. In regards to potential of United Ireland, many would argue that Belfast Hall is the forgotten part of Ireland, particularly with the physical manifestation of the migrant crisis.
Yeah.
If a United Ireland was to come about, how would you ensure, what safeguards would you advocate for put in place to ensure that Northern Ireland is not becoming like Belfast Hall and been forgotten?
Yeah, I mean, partition, when you said word, hasn't just been bad for Northern Ireland, it's been bad for, it's been bad for Donegal as well and for other border counties, and just that artificial division, it's such a bluntly old-fashioned solution, and it didn't, and I think removing that, addressing that division in society will be good for the whole of the North West, and you can already see the seeds of how proper North-South cooperation, in terms of the cancer care, or the kind of clustering around up in Galvin and the Atlantic College, is it? That just the potential of once you remove that artificial line on the map and services can more logically cluster around, I think that can really be a positive thing. I think there are useful thought experiments around potential devolution created in the New Ireland because of the locus of the Good Friday Agreement, and there's nothing that says the Good Friday Agreement disappears or puff of smoke after constitutional change until we change it. Devolution is supposed to still exist. I've got views on how plausible that is, going down the line, but it could help us think about devolution in a different way. And if you look at things like the new mayor and Limerick and some of the other conversations about city and regional mayors in the Republic, maybe ways of enhancing the power of the North West, but ultimately I think removing the border will be good. It's very easy to see that the west of Northern Ireland has been disadvantaged by partition, for want of a better word, and Donegal has too, and removing that line can only help each of those counties.
Last four hands.
Sort of similar to Matthew's question about exclusion. In New Ireland, how would you be able to include British or Ulster Scots identifiers into this New Ireland?
Totally, and I think I said like the fact that I think it's 1 in 5 people in the Republic now is not either born in the Republic or don't have an Irish heritage, and I think it has done really, really well, has managed that change really, really well. I think it's fair to say that integrating Britishness is, no point pretending that it's not going to be a challenge, and I said it was something I'm genuinely, really, truly excited about as an opportunity, because. But so yeah, I think it's about not just that the Unionist friend take sugar, implying that Britishness is radically different to Irishness, and it's also about an Irishness that for a lot of people, not myself, not included, they've sort of defined their Irishness as being not British and hostile to Britishness. That's never been my form of Irishness. I celebrate the links and the kind of aspects of British culture. I mean, if you go into any house in the Republic, they're listening to British media, they're watching stuff off the BBC, they're enjoying British music, they're going to British events, plays, festivals, all of that kind of stuff. So I take a lot of inspiration, and obviously I spend a fair bit of time with the Irish in Britain as an organisation and as a concept. And I think there's just a maturity to identity for people who have either moved from Ireland, probably in their youth, or have Irish heritage, and they very, very comfortably hold those two identities together in a complementary way, at a level of maturity that would leave this region in the dust. And I think having having that as a model shows that it's entirely possible. There's no point in pretending that it's not going to be a challenge. I think we focused on some of the symbolic stuff about Commonwealth and changing the flag. I'm up for all of that stuff. Definitely change the anthem. But I just don't think it represents who. I think there's so much exciting and inspiring about Irishness that isn't represented in that. But that is the game, and I suppose it's about understanding what things people who identify primarily as British would wish to see in the new Ireland, and starting from there. But I do think the Irish and Britain is a really exciting place to look.
As one of those people,
yeah,
I'm happy to have two identities.
Yeah,
I think it's just lucky.
Yeah, and I think sometimes if you look, I've joked before, but I'm serious about it, sometimes political unionism here, they offer Britishness and they talk about the royals and the military and stuff that personally I have zero interest in, and I'm like, why don't you talk to me about the BBC? Why don't you talk to me about the Beatles? Why don't you talk to me about theatre? All of the great things about Britishness, and as I say, we will always be next door neighbours and best friends in the constitutional future. We're not going to live, hundreds of thousands of Irish people will live in Britain and British people will live in Ireland, and long may that continue. So that's one of the reasons why we don't go, I'm not going over to your parliament and I'm not going over to your country. We show respect for British, for Britain's political structures, because they're going to have a relationship with them in whatever future looks like.
Thank you, Claire. I'll sleep much better today.
Good. Do you mean I'm bored you to sleep? Is that
Claire Hanna. Also, Claire, thanks for continuing to moderate our LitTalk series. Continuing on LitTalks, next Thursday, if you contact Ryan for the link to get tickets, we will have Barnett Louisa May joining us in the society. So please do come along. I believe this Claire will be moderated. If you're a fan of the Claire Dickson show, so if you contact Ryan with the link, and we will update you about venue and time later. Thank you again for coming. It's really important to continue these engagements with politicians, especially for students here at Queen's and everyone that kind of gets involved. So I think some of us are going to go to Lavery's after this. You're very welcome to join us. And tomorrow you can join us for our debate, for our next debate. This house means test the NHS at the same time right here in the McMordie Hall. So thank you very much.